Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Powerful Stuff. Powerful Stuff helps you tap into your inner connection with yourself, the outer connection with the world, and doing so while not taking yourself so seriously. And today we have a very special guest, Gerta Malaj, co-founder of yournegotiations.com. I actually met Gerta at a female founders and funders dinner organized by my friend Allie in San Francisco. And we were talking about negotiations there, and she was really telling me around the mindset of negotiations, the co-creation, the kind of trusting in the positive outcome. And I just really loved this empowering approach to thinking about negotiations, which so many people can be so scared by. And personally, think knowing how to negotiate is also knowing how to own our self-worth, which is our personal magnetism, from a place of soft power where we're not strong-arming others, but hopefully empowering everyone for the best outcome. So we're going to go through Gerta's Art of Negotiations today. But before we do, I just want to give a little intro to our amazing guest and one of our loyal listeners, actually. So it was so cool because she came up to me at the dinner and she's like, I listen to Powerful Stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, wow. This is like the first IRL interaction of someone coming up to me and saying that. So it was very, very special for me. So Gerta is co-founder of yournegotiations.com, which I mentioned, a negotiations expert on job offers and business deals. She's trained with world-class negotiators from MIT and Harvard Law School, and she's developed a deep negotiation expertise in over 10 years, given her previous employment at LinkedIn and salary.com. She's had a huge career in big tech. She has worked at startups and also has done some angel investing. She holds a master's in logistics engineering from MIT and a degree in math from Wellesley. And then on the job offers front, which she helps people negotiate, she's helped people increase their initial offer by $93,000, which is like basically, someone's whole salary as an addition. That's amazing on average, and up to $550,000 on top of initial offers. So Gerta's a negotiations powerhouse, powerful stuff, as some would say. So happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Mer. I can't believe I get to be interviewed at my favorite podcast, one of my favorites.
Oh my gosh, I'm so honored as well. And I would love to just start off by how did you get into negotiations? Like, what was that spark for you where you're like, I actually really love
Yeah, it's one of those things that you connect the dots looking backwards. So the way my husband Alex and we started this company over a year ago, but when I look back, it makes so much sense. So I'm originally from Albania. I grew up there, and it's a very hustle culture. It's a developing country. One funny thing I say about Albania is that we don't like staying in lines. We don't have lines. Now we do, but when I was growing up, it wasn't very common. So you're kind of like elbowing your way into things. And then it's, being a developing country, it's very you need to fight for it to get things as simple as food. It was very poor before I was born. But so that gave me that sort of internal hustle and desire to get better deals. And then I'm also always been very fascinated with psychology and behavioral sciences. So when I think back to what I was reading in middle school and high school, it was things like Negotiation Genius or Tipping Point and Freakonomics and things like that. I loved hearing about these studies that showed what, how people, human psychology and what works and what doesn't work in interactions. And then when I was in undergrad and grad, I took many classes on negotiations and was trained under world-class negotiators who had helped negotiate government stuff. And then I've been a founder for the last few years. I was a venture-backed founder at one point and was actually trying to solve the loneliness crisis with a consumer social app, but that didn't work. It was very hard to find product market fit, but as I was trying to figure out my next thing, I'm Alex and I were thinking, what should we work on next? And we had learned about online education businesses and how powerful they can be. Like, okay, what could we teach? And I've had a reputation for a while in my community of helping people with like job offer negotiations, rent negotiations, or various things. And like, okay, we should probably teach negotiations. So that's how that was the journey.
Wow, I love that so much. And what was your first like experience or one prominent one that sticks out to you of your first kind of trial by fire of negotiating something for yourself? And what was like your biggest lesson there?
A couple of examples come to mind. Because of sort of my readings and just being very immersed into this world, I always negotiated my job offers, even my first one out of college, and which, it's kind of intimidating. You're like, I have no leverage, but that one went great. I just asked for more. I actually asked for, I think they gave me 2 weeks of vacation. Which, if we have any international or European listeners, like, how can you have only 2 weeks a week, a year? Jesus.
Oh
But
my gosh, I know. It's like
yeah.
crazy.
And so I actually negotiated an extra week of vacation, and then I negotiated a percentage of more. I just asked. It was as simple as like, hey, I'm going to be visiting my family in Albania 2 weeks a year. Like that's just travel time. They're like, okay, sure, get another week. And then for money, similarly, it was something like, is there any chance you could give me a bit more? And they're like, sure. And so that was my first job out of college with no leverage, no other offers at the time.
That's
And
amazing
then,
though. I
sorry?
love that. Or just to put a pin in that,
Yeah,
sometimes it's just as simple as asking, and people assume
absolutely.
like if this is the rule or, oh, it's 2 weeks, so why bother asking? And I love this one, like you said, when you had no leverage, it's like sometimes it's just as simple as like asking nicely.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the core things I teach my clients and my students. And yeah, it's just sometimes you just have to ask. And then the next thing is like, you want to be a little gently persistent, and maybe you ask a couple more times. It's okay. So those are some of the principles. And then the other thing is maybe along similar lines, just not stopping yourself from something because you think it's impossible. So I helped someone, they were buying a home, and I was helping with like various negotiations. I negotiated lawyer fees, I negotiated home inspection fees. And the real estate agent was like, wow, I didn't know you could negotiate those. The person who's supposed to tell you what to do and what to negotiate was surprised. So again, yeah, it's wild what and how many things you could negotiate.
Yeah, just not assuming things are set in stone, but rather like, what if I ask? I
Exactly.
I love that so much. And then what is a time where like a negotiation didn't go well, but you had like a deep learning from it, whether it was for you or for someone else, or just like a faux pas that happened that ended up being like a huge takeaway of like, I'm always going to remember this.
I think I'm trying to think of a good example, but more broadly, I can't think of a specific example, but more broadly, what happens is like sometimes you ask very nicely. I've heard this from other people, and the other party could just like overreact to, even though you ask like very nicely, they absolutely overreact. It has happened to some people. Tell me stories of like, oh, this company withdrew my application because I asked. Now none of my clients have had that happen, because I always tell them like, you want to ask very gently and nicely and professionally. It wouldn't make sense for them to like retract the offer if you ask in that way. But some people will overreact, and the takeaway is you have dodged a big bullet there. If
Yeah.
you imagine, if I come to you, Mary, I'm like, would you mind if, ABC, like we start this interview later or whatever, and you can simply say no. But if you're like, no, I'm just not going to interview you at all, like, okay, that's an overreaction. It's probably for the best that we don't engage.
Right. Yes, that's so true of like rather than if somebody does have an overreaction rather than going into like people pleasing mode or trying to prove to them it's like this is actually an indication of what it would be like to have a longer standing relationship with them. So it's like you can keep the power or the ball in your court by being like, do I even want to work with someone or engage with someone if this is going to be their reaction?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Rather than feeling like I'm walking on eggshells. I love that so much because it keeps you rooted in your own self worth. And I was going to say, maybe before we go into some tactical steps of negotiations, if we could just talk a little bit about like what I love about your negotiation tactics is so much of like the mindset and
Mhm.
the energetics around it. So, yeah, could you share kind of some of the stuff that you coach your clients on, kind of just like that foundational energetics of negotiation and things they can do internally before they even say anything to someone else, like just the mindset that they should cultivate going into it?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of my job is to debunk a lot of myths that are out there. Actually, to answer, I guess I can combine these two questions into one of the things that backfires is people taking things personally and also playing hard to get in playing difficult in negotiations. And so you want to maybe sort of have your own mindset of I'm not gonna take things personally. This is just the job market right now, or this is just a business deal. And also, you don't have to play difficult in negotiations. It actually needs to be very collaborative. So you go into the negotiation deal with the mindset of like, we're in this together. We both want to make it work. Let's think of ways how to make it work that we're both happy with. So those are some initial mindsets that I coach people around. For the job market aspect, it's a very tough job market now and in the last couple of years, especially with the tech layoffs and all that, the economy. And it's so easy to sort of get wrapped up in that sort of feeling defeated and feeling like I was making so much at this other company and I felt so respected, and now this offer is so much lower. But when you bring that positivity and collaboration mindset into it, people will want to work with you, and you're more likely to get the offer and get a better offer. Those are some initial thoughts.
Yeah, the positivity mindset for sure. And like the co creation. And I love what you said there because it's actually kind of, how I went into um, negotiating with my co-founder around like what our transition would look like for more of that and powerful stuff, and we've come to a really great place and I'll still be involved with more of that. But when we went into it, it was kind of like setting the tone of we're both we both love each other. We both want we're committed to having these conversations, however difficult they might be, until we both feel happy with the outcome and it's what's best for us and it's what's best for more of that and it's what's best for powerful stuff. So like keeping that at the center of our hearts and like starting each conversation and ending each conversation reaffirming that, I think helped lower my stress and anxiety levels so much, especially because it was a good friend and is a good friend that I had started a company with. And yeah, I just think like that tone versus like I need to be up in arms and on the defense and like
Yeah,
all of that, which
yeah,
would have
I
made
love
it like a lot more like nasty and kind of like disregarding all the love that we had for each other and have for each other.
Yeah, I love that. And even in the business world, you can have that same approach. And again, people want to work with people who want to be there and people who are nice to work with and pleasant to work with. So that helps. That mindset helps in ways that are can translate into tangible ways.
And are there any like tactics that you go through with your clients to like get them to that positive place or to help them not take things personally? Yeah, and I can speak to that too a little bit just from like the coaching perspective, but I'm curious like if you do have a client where it does feel deeply personal or maybe it is like somebody who they already know, like what are some things that you remind them of or help them anchor into to be able to like sit in that in the heat of the negotiation?
Yeah,
The
I joke.
negotiation.
Yeah. I joke that half my job is being a bit of a therapist to my clients because there's a lot of validation. Like I say things like it is a tough market out there. People are getting lowballed. A lot of offers are lowballing. The companies are lowballing people. It's not personal, I promise to you. And I'm seeing this in the market, things like that. And also like actually explaining that, because if you are collaborative and positive and nice and professional, whoever you're negotiating with, they're more likely to advocate for you to their decision makers. And I have this expression we love in our company. It's you catch more flies with honey and I really like that. I don't know about you, but I feel like in the culture, the when you hear negotiations, you think of the show Suits or like lawyers and business deals. Everyone's like buttoned up and they're like very tough negotiators. They strong arm you into doing what you want and what they want. And I want to move away from that and think about it more in a collaborative way, as I said, like positive, creative. It can be very, very creative. I would love to talk about that more.
Yeah, I love that because I do feel like energetically it's like the feminine touch to it. And
Yeah.
like what I like to call soft power, which is like power
Mhm.
through empathy and emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And like you said, like working with people and assuming best intentions and bringing out their best intentions while also having firm boundaries. And it's so true because I think we think of like suits or like macho men, like
Yeah.
hostage negotiators when we think of negotiation. But like you said, it can be collaborative, it can be creative, it can be empathetic. Yeah, I
Mhm.
would love to hear like what the creative elements are, and then we can kind of from there go through the arc of a negotiation in these different
Yeah.
scenarios and kind of break down the steps for our listener to call forth an example that they want to workshop.
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind is in the context of job offers. It could be that the company might have, maybe they've been looking for a while and they need someone to start as soon as possible, or they have an important deadline or project. And then for you, maybe you want to take some time off, but more money is better. So, and then this is how you care about two different things and you can give, I guess, each other, like do a trade. And so the way to be collaborative is like trying to figure out what the other party cares about. So it could be something like, hey, like, is there any chance you have more room in your budget? I'm happy to maybe start earlier, or I don't know, like it could be something else, like come in the office more often or things like that. And then the company realizes like, oh yeah, we actually would love for you to start earlier. We're happy to throw in a bit more money. So that's one example where you are maybe showing your cards just a little bit, and then you're being collaborative and you're being creative in the ways in which you can give them something and get something in return.
I love that. I realize I'm saying I love that a lot because I'm just like loving everything you're saying. Yes, more of
I'm
that.
very excited.
Um, what are some questions that people could ask to kind of figure out what the other person wants?
Yeah, actually, if I can answer a slightly different question very quickly,
Yeah.
you asked earlier about preparation before you even go into the sort of negotiation deal or
Mhm.
table. You also need to, like, the most important question to ask yourself is, what are my priorities and what are my non-negotiables? So in the
Mm,
job context, you would think it's money, right? Like in this, generally people think of salary, but when I probe my clients, it very often is not money the main priority. It could be things like title, like they wouldn't take a lower title than they had at their last job, which is interesting because title is not necessarily one to one with pay. You can actually have a lower title but higher pay than you had at your last job. But we've made that happen with some of my clients. And then it could be things like flexibility of work from home, commute, team culture and things like that. So it's very important for people to go into the negotiation having a very clear understanding of their priorities in order of priority, but also which of those are non-negotiable, because you want to immediately talk about the non-negotiables. Again, because you don't want to have gone through the entire negotiation. You're like, oh, actually, I wouldn't take a lower title. And then they're like, oh, we're not giving a higher title. And then you've wasted each other's time. So that, I guess, to answer your original question, is like, if you have identified some non-negotiables, those could be some questions. It could be like, if your non-negotiable is I need to work from home, I don't know, twice a week, and I will not take a lower title, then you can immediately ask like, hey, what's your work from home policy? And wanted to double check if the title is this one. The reason I mentioned that is because, again, this is an employer's market right now, and a lot of companies are going back on their original offers or their postings. And sometimes the offer people end up with is a lower title, lower pay than what the company had posted, unfortunately. So you actually want to double check that up front.
yeah, that's great. Because also I love how you frame it as a question, like assuming best intent rather than saying you're non-negotiable of like, just so you know, I'm only
Yeah.
going to work from home. It's like, Hi, I'm curious, like, what is your work from home policy? And
Yeah.
like, just double checking the title. It's like that underlying, like, assuming best intent versus like being on the defense of like stating, like, this is my.
Yeah. And I actually have a personal example on this. So, when I first moved to San Francisco, I got an offer from LinkedIn, but the job description said this position is based out of, I think it was uh, Sunnyvale. This position is based out of Sunnyvale, non-negotiable. It even said there, absolutely not SF. And I just happened to be living across the street from the San Francisco office. And I also get extremely car sick. So imagine my commute, if I had been based out of the Sunnyvale office, would be an hour and a half on a bus and a shuttle each way. So just a waste of time and a health risk. So as we're negotiating and wrapping up, I asked the recruiter, like, is there any chance at all? I know it said on the job description that the role is based in Sunnyvale, but I happen to live literally across the street from the SF office. It would save me 3 hours of commute. I can put that work into, that time into work. Is there any chance I can just work out of there maybe one Friday, a month? And this was before COVID, so work from home wasn't as common. And it turned out she was like, actually, our team is now split between Sunnyvale and SF because there's more people that we've hired in SF. So you could actually be based out of SF. And
Wow.
that was one of those things I'm so glad I asked. And when I shared this example with certain groups, they're like, oh, I would never question the job description. People would say, can you not read? Like, it was so clear there that this was non-negotiable. But it doesn't hurt to ask. And though, especially if you phrase it in a way where it's like, I'm just sharing, like, this would be beneficial for both of us. I'm very proud that I asked.
Yeah, and that you made it kind of like a no-brainer for them. You're like, all of that time that I would be commuting,
Yeah.
you would actually get like, 3 hours of more work from me
Yeah.
um, in place of that commute. Doesn't that sound great?
Exactly. You always want to phrase it in a what's in it for them way. It's less about what's in it for you, but it's good to be a little vulnerable and share your side of it. So I did. I'm like, I get very car sick. This would really help me, but also I can put that work into that time into the work.
And what is the like balance or art? And we'll kind of go through these again when we go through the tactical steps. But what
Mhm.
is the balance or art of knowing how much to be vulnerable and knowing when to reveal some of your cards? Because I know there's like some negotiation people, like the never split the difference guy, who says like a certain person should go first or drop your number first or like,
Mhm.
so what's your kind of thoughts on like how to be vulnerable when and when you should kind of state your thing versus like if they're hearing what they expect to pay you or if it's like a co-founder negotiation like what their equity split
Yeah.
is versus like you going first, etc.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions within that one question. So
Yeah.
I guess maybe to address one of them, the main one, which is, do you give your number first? I guess that there's that. In a job offer setting, you never want to give a number first. And that's because you could be giving a lower number than their budget and now you left money on the table, or you could be giving a higher number than their budget and you could be turning them off. That's because it's what is that term, like an uneven information, I forget, there's like an
Right, yeah, like
economic
an
term.
information disparity or
Yeah, one of
imbalance or
those.
something.
Yeah. And so they have so employers, even small startups, they have access to employer reported compensation data. They have access to advisors, investors, mentors. So a company has so much information. They know their budget. You as a job applicant, it's extremely unlikely, unless you're a compensation professional, I have a master's in compensation or whatever, you don't know exactly how much you should be paid because of the market dynamics and all the information that I mentioned. And even if you are an expert in compensation somehow, you don't know their budget. Every team has their own budget for an open role, and it could be higher or lower than the market based on their priorities. So because you don't have visibility into that at all, it's like mathematically doesn't make sense to give your number first. And you just want to navigate that in a very obviously professional and cordial way. So you can simply say, like, I don't have a number in mind. I'm curious what your data shows and what your budget is. And I can I have like 5 other things you could be saying, but not having, I actually recommend, when we talked about mindset, I recommend people don't have a number in mind. That's the best way to be able to answer this truthfully. Yes.
But
And
then
then
even
so
if they're like, no, you go first, you're like, no, honestly, you go first.
I've actually done this with many recruiters when I was applying to jobs myself throughout my career. I would just say, like, I genuinely don't have a number in mind, or like, I would prefer that we talk about the work and see if it's a mutually good fit first, and then we can talk compensation later. And then we would go back and forth. Some companies are very persistent, and I like it. It's fun. But it can be stressful as well. This has happened to me with at least 3 companies where we did this dance. I'm like, I genuinely don't have a number, and they start laughing after a while because they knew I know that the game of not giving a number. So I
They
know it can
eventually
be
gave
scary.
in.
Sorry?
Did they eventually give in?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, because I mean, that's the game, right? The game is you don't wanna give a number, and once they know that you know how to play it, they laughed, like 3 of them. It was actually so funny. And then I've been on the hiring side of things, and I feel so bad. It breaks my heart when I see the candidates share a number proactively. I never ask. But some people share like, oh, I'm making this much at this job. I'm like, oh, you shouldn't have shared. Sometimes I don't take the note just to like give back the leverage to them.
Oh, that's so sweet. And well, and it's also a good look for you too if they know that you're playing the game, because then they're like, this
Yes,
person's smart, and if she can negotiate with us, then she can negotiate on behalf of us, you know?
absolutely. Yes. And so one of my toughest managers I've ever had, I'm like, how much do I reveal? But I had, yeah, the toughest manager. I negotiated my job offer. I didn't know she was going to be so tough later on. But she actually complimented me a few months into the role. She's like, you negotiated really well, the job offer. And she gave me some very exciting deals and like multi-million-dollar contracts to negotiate because I had sort of, in a way, proven myself as a good negotiator doing the job offer.
I love that. Well, yeah, and I feel like it kind of goes back to like owning our worth from the inside out. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like sometimes we know we're in our zone of genius, or we have a lot to offer in a job role or whatever it might be. And it truly does invite us to step into our inner worth by like owning that. And as I know in the coaching industry, I know a lot of other coaches, myself included, in the earlier days that really struggle putting a number or a price tag on their coaching service, because that's also literally,
Yes.
you're getting paid for your value and what you bring to the table for somebody else. Yeah, and it's also like, as hard or uncomfortable as it might be, it's also like the first step in showing someone like, I know my worth. I
Yeah.
have these boundaries. I can say it respectfully. Um, yeah, and
Yeah.
you're either willing to meet me here or you're not. But then when you cave or you're acting sheepish about it, it also kind of can feel like you're not fully rooted in your worth or your value offer.
Yeah. And for coaches, and consultants, I have a recommendation. I would encourage you to try out asking for someone's budget before you give a number of your hourly rate, just in case. You would be surprised. I have some examples where just sort of navigating things in this way, we've been surprised. If you don't mind me sharing
Yeah,
that.
please. I would love to hear, because I think that there's a lot of solopreneur
Yeah.
loyal listeners who would be very curious to hear like
Yeah.
this kind of side of the negotiation as well, especially when as a coach you want to have a set price, but everyone kind of knows that it's you know, subjective based on like your time, your value, how in demand you are, etc.
Yeah, this example was going to be it's still in the job offer context. Would it be okay to mention actual numbers? I don't
Yeah,
want to alienate.
absolutely.
Okay, because my
Let's do it.
all my clients are mid-level and execs in tech, biotech, finance, and all that. So the numbers can be a little intimidating. But I had a client who was making 220K at Meta, and she got an offer and she was like, this is pretty good. This was in the middle of layoffs and a scary market. And she's like, this is pretty good. Can I just ask them to match my 220 from Meta? And then I'm happy to sign. And I was like, oh, let's just keep playing this one more time, like the open-ended, like, do you have more room in your budget thing? Like, you don't give a specific number. She's like, okay. So she asked them, do you have more room in your budget? And they came back with 240K. So she would have missed out on the extra 20K if she had asked for a specific number. So that's one example that comes to mind. So yeah, highly recommend. And then if you just so happen to, if they're lowballing you, you can always say things like, hey, well, my research shows this, or my last client paid this. Then you can sort of come out of that with more tangible examples, but you never know what their first number could be. So I strongly recommend trying that out.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question if like they come back with a disappointing number.
Yeah. Then you can be like, let's say that if they came back with like 205 or something, they're like, oh, well, my last job was 220. Any chance you can match that? Or would you mind throwing in another 15K, 20K? You can still ask. It just because they come back with something disappointing doesn't mean that's the end.
Right. So it's not taking it as a final answer,
Yeah.
but being like, okay, they might have expected that, or they might have been starting low because they know that it won't be the ending number. So I might
Yeah.
as well try. And then I guess going back to like the coaching example, let's say like when you are a coach or a solopreneur or consultant, when it's kind of like they expect you to have a set price. How would you recommend navigating that? Because you could ask, like, what is your budget? And then I guess, like, tailor it or be like, well, I usually charge this, but for that amount, we could do this. And this is what you would get for the full amount. Or, like, what do you recommend to triage there?
Yeah, there's a lot to play with. It could be if someone is maybe saying a very low number, you could say, oh, actually, I have this expertise and the market shows that for that, I typically people are charging this much, and then you can also break down your offering. So let's say, so for me, as I can take myself as an example, so I can review offer letters, I can coach one-on-one, I can do 1 hour calls and things like that. So then I can be like, oh, if their price is pretty low, I'm like, okay, if that's your budget, I could do like a, I don't know, half an hour call, but you will get more value from a 3 hour call with me and something like that. So you're still, don't take offense, don't take it personally, and kind of like educate them. So a lot of clients probably don't know what the prices are out there, or like what the different offerings are and what your value add is. So you can just kind of pull them out of the number they gave you, and you can either say, this is what you get for that, or maybe you want this other suite of offerings.
Yeah, that's great. It reminds me, or earlier on in my career too, and I do corporate stuff now, like with companies and whatnot. But like, I didn't really have, because I was just in the coaching world, like as much of a context for like how much companies are willing to pay, and startups are different than corporate companies. And
Yeah.
so like, there was one time that I way undershot what I should
Mhm.
be, or like somebody was like, oh, well, what would you put together a budget for us of how much it would cost to have you do this thing for our team. And I like way underballed it,
Mhm.
which made me seem like really inexperienced. And then the horrible thing about that, but then we all learn and grow, and I love and forgive myself, is that then I had the pendulum swing the next time.
Mm.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I thought I was inexperienced and unprofessional. So the next time someone asked me, I maybe gave like double what my gut was telling me. And then they were like, this is way too much. We don't have budget for this. And they, rather than even negotiate with me, they actually just then started pulsing a few other executive coaches and found another coach
Mhm.
before before we even had another dialogue of, or I had sent them, when they said that's too much, I was like, oh, well, like what, I want to work with you on this. And so
Yeah.
yeah, just
This is
curious your
exactly why you
thoughts
don't
on
want to
how
give.
I handled that. I know they were
Yeah,
both learning experiences.
yeah, exhibit A and B, why you don't want to give the first number. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
when they said
Sorry
like
that
put
happened.
together your budget for this, because that was like over email, I should have just been like, well, how much do you guys have in budget? And then I can tell you what I offer based on.
Yeah, there's different ways you can navigate that. You can say, well, here's a list of my offerings. What is your budget for this? You can ask like, how much have you paid a recent coach or a previous coach? You can say, well, there's a range of coaching in the market. You can like kind of probe. You can like, coaches in the market nowadays, so that the education piece is, they're charging between this much and this much. Which one, like which side of the range were you more open to? So you can like probe in different ways without necessarily saying like, I charge this much, because that's a fixed number and it can be scary. So you want to kind of like work around that.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess like the second example was like the same thing of like, how much is in your budget for this experience? And let me see if that works with like my offerings.
Yeah,
But it was just so funny because I got like shot in the foot from the low end and the high end. And yeah, I've definitely learned my lesson since. And to be clear for everybody listening too, it's like with coaching, I know it's so subjective, but it's what I try to help my solopreneur clients or other coaches who I coach um, um, with now, which is just like really owning and believing in the value of what we are offering and trusting in like how what type of client would feel good for what amount of time, and as our schedule starts to fill up, like energetically, how good does it feel to hold space for one client or for a company offsite, and like kind of yeah, checking in with your intuition of what amount would make you feel resentful to do that
yeah.
based on like how big your workload is and like what type of energy you would be or space you would be holding for that person or people.
Yeah, that's a great point. It comes back to, you need to know your own priorities and non-negotiables before you go into the deal. So, yeah, like you said, know what amount it would make you resentful. Like, of course, what's your walk away point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you like navigate like kind of what we just talked about, but let's say it's like an equity conversation
Mhm.
or like the formation of a company or the breakup of a company. Does anything change or do all of these kind of remain the same? Like if you were going into a company with a friend or getting out of a company with a friend or just regular business partner, does it change when you're like giving an equity number?
There's a lot of sort of transferability from one approach to another. So you want to be very crystal clear with yourself. For me, when I was negotiating equity with a previous co-founder, I was like, I didn't want less than, I think roughly, in my mind, I didn't share this, but I didn't want less than 25-30%, just because it's a long journey and you give away a lot of your equity along the way, and you want to have skin in the game. And you can use those arguments with the other side as well. You can say, I want to be an equal partner in this because I want to put my whole self into this. I'm very committed. I will sacrifice a lot. So I want to have a good skin in the game. And that's a good argument. Like if I were to bring someone in as a co-founder, I if I hear they're like, I want more equity because I want to have skin in the game, and this be my baby too. I'm like, yeah, that's a great point. There's that. There's the collaborative aspect of it. I think of negotiations as infinite games. If you've heard that term, finite games versus infinite games, like the world is so small, and you will cross paths with people again. It's not about squeezing every cent out of the pot and the deal. You want to keep the relationship in mind. You want to keep the deal and prioritize the deal for it to go through. And so, it doesn't necessarily have to be with equity, like, doesn't have necessarily have to be like 50-50. If anything, actually, there's a lot of advice out there that says not to make it 50-50, because one person needs to have the final say, and you don't want to be caught in cross the road all the time if you
Totally.
disagree.
Yeah, I love what like the idea of the infinite game because bringing it back to our powerful stuff, spirituality, abundance truly is everywhere. And like, I do believe there's room at the top for everyone. And like you were saying, it's like, yeah, if we believe we'll cross paths again or that, things could change in the future. And that's why, too, with like my, current agreement around like our transition of more of that and powerful stuff, I'm like, this is what I'm willing to do. And let's check in like in this negotiation, let's check in at the 3-month mark
Mhm.
before we sign anything and
Mhm.
make sure that we're both keeping up our end of the deal. It still feels really good for both of us. And then at which point we'll carry out the rest of the transition and finalize it. But also just having kind of like a little bit of that trial period or not needing everything to be finalized immediately and kind of having trust in that, then I think incentivized us both, although we would do it out of the goodness of our hearts because we love each other anyways, but like to make it a win-win for the other person. So when the 3 months come along, both of us are like, yeah, this still feels really good. So then it's kind of like or I don't know if this is the Nash equilibrium, but the idea of like both of us wanting it to be the best scenario for the other person. So then we're both like trying to make that happen because then it benefits us too.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And yeah, and the other side of that is also like if you, especially if it's a VC backed startup, it will probably be a very long journey, like 7, 10 years. And if you're contributing unevenly at the beginning, maybe someone put a few $1,000s in the business and someone didn't, over the long run, it will not matter as much in 7, 10 years. So there's also that aspect of it. I don't want to reveal too much, but I've actually been so inspired by our mutual friend, Sam. We talked about how she handled her equity negotiations with her co-founder, and it was so beautiful what she said. I don't want to sort of reveal her own personal stuff, but it came from such a beautiful place in her heart. I think she said something like, I want someone who is all in on this with me, and even though she had invested a lot of time and effort already when she brought someone in, I think she was very fair in how she split the company, and I was very inspired by it.
Yeah, that belief of like we have like a smaller piece of a bigger pie versus like you said squeezing or like power dynamics. Or I was even listening to this other podcast outside of powerful stuff. I know it's crazy to believe. Um yesterday, and this guy was like the richest people in the world, some of the richest people in the world are the most generous because it's like they know that like they get to the top through like other people helping them and vice versa. And so it's like that kind of generosity of like I'm here to help you, and everyone wins, then people end up helping you more and then you end up becoming better off for that versus like, oh, I need to be defensive around this person because they try to squeeze every dime out of me or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. I actually do this with so I obviously negotiate all contracts, including my phone contract, my rent, concert tickets, and all that. But when I'm negotiating, especially with a support team a member, I say something like, "You've been so wonderful to work with. I'm happy to leave a review or like, I don't know, call your manager or write an email for your manager," and just sort of like rewarding generous behavior. So I strongly recommend that approach.
Yes, rewarding generous behavior. And it's like then they feel relaxed because they know that you have their best interests at heart and that they don't need to be like on the defense around that. And yeah, I try to think about that in everything. And it kind of comes back to like, yeah, trusting in like the goodness and the intentions of others. And at the same time, like not taking initial reactions personally. And
Mhm.
that's what I kept reminding myself in past negotiations, whether it was equity or co-founder stuff or whatever. It's like someone's initial reaction isn't always their ending reaction, and they're
Mhm.
allowed to have that. And that's why it's good to also like, or at least for me in those scenarios, being like, okay, well, why don't you sit with this and let's talk about it in a day or two or whatever, and not taking it as like their final answer, but just being like they're having a human reaction.
Yes.
Um, and it's not personal. And also, when they bring something to my attention that I find shocking or internally triggering, to kind of remain stoic and let
Yes.
like approach it with curiosity of like, oh, I'm curious, like, where is that coming from or why is that important to you versus getting defensive and internally I want to say like, no, I'm never doing that, but instead being like, yeah, I'm curious where that's coming from. I need to sit with that, let me think about it, versus feeling like sometimes I feel like when people are given a number or something that they feel the need to immediately respond. And I
Yes.
think that's been one of my biggest learnings too, of like saying like, let me sit with that and not
Mhm.
responding immediately and truly like sitting with it, getting a few opinions on it, just sleeping on it.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on some very important points. One is that I get asked a lot, is there any time I shouldn't negotiate? And I say, you should actually always negotiate. Well, one is it doesn't hurt to ask, especially if you're doing it in a nice and professional way. The other piece is more practically in the job offer sense. The first offer is pretty much guaranteed to never be the final offer. That's because companies expect candidates to negotiate. at least one candidate out there will negotiate because they might have other offers and they can't decide. So they will ask the companies if they can match each other's offers. So because they expect candidates to negotiate, they leave some room in their budget to give you more as a sign of like, we really want you. And so if you're not negotiating, you're pretty much guaranteed to be leaving money on the table. So that's one. And then you touched on something else towards the end. I'm trying to remember now, but I
So
forgot.
it was either the trusting that their reaction won't be the same, maybe long term, or giving it space, not responding immediately.
Oh, yes, yes. There's a couple points here. One is that silence is such a powerful tool in negotiations. A lot of people are not comfortable with silence, so they will try to fill it. So when you're negotiating, and let's say give you maybe a number and you're just sitting there, or maybe you say, let me think about it. Now I'm nervous. Oh no, is marriage just gonna decline us or something? Then I want to feel it. Well, actually, let me give you another X% because I'm nervous. You're just gonna leave the deal. So silence is very powerful. And then just to put my nerdy hat on very quickly, because I love math and have a degree in math, the probability of you having the right response on the spot when you are being made an offer or are negotiating live is very small. If you take time, you're giving yourself more time to have the right response to the negotiation move, versus that slice in time for your response to be the perfect one right there. It's a very small probability. So you actually want to take the time and give yourself the space to.
Do you have any other just like cool little like probabilities or statistics about negotiation that you can share with the Powerful Stuff fam?
I have a counterintuitive thing. As much as I love numbers, in the job offer context, I actually don't think it's a good use of a candidate's time to go and do all the research out there. It's very counterintuitive because a lot of, like I said, our clients are mid-level to execs. And so they love numbers, and many of them have MBAs, and they're just going and researching. The reason why they don't matter is, one, as a candidate, you don't have access to real market data. The employer reported data is actually very expensive to have access to. It's what companies pay tens of thousands of dollars to have access to. It's things like Carta or salary.com, and LinkedIn has salary data. So your data is probably not correct to begin with. And then second, it doesn't matter because each role has a budget attached to it, and they have their own reasons why they're paying this much. It could be, as I mentioned earlier, it could be they have some time pressure. Maybe they want to get a project started as soon as possible. So, okay, we'll throw more money at this candidate just to have them to say yes. Or it could be that they don't have any pressure and like, oh, it would be nice to fill this role. It's a new role, but we don't have to fill it. And so like maybe it's a smaller budget for whatever reason. And so we don't have that visibility. And the market data, you can go to a company and say, this is what the market shows. You should be paying me this much. And they're like, well, our budget is not there. So, and then you've spent hours researching. It's, yeah, it's kind of wild because my instinct is like, oh, do all the research and find all the numbers. But I recommend not to do that.
So it's almost like going in blind and kind of seeing what they offer and then checking in with yourself. Is this something I'm willing to do? And then I think it's interesting too to consider if they really do have a certain salary that you were expecting higher, but that's literally like not what they can pay you. Um, then how do you negotiate like I don't want to say like the freebies, but like, okay, I'm willing to do this lower salary for you, but then can you match me with these vacation days or this equity? Or how do you negotiate like that second round where like
Yeah.
maybe they actually couldn't meet your salary request um or something, but how do you kind of like get the leverage back for like other things
Yeah.
that you want to have?
So let me zoom out a bit and sort of share the bigger picture of the strategy that I'm recommending, because there's a missing piece to see the whole thing. So you come in, you don't give a number, you let them say the first number because your number might be too low. You leave money on the table, or too high and you're turning them off. Then you negotiate through open-ended questions, because you don't know the top of their budget, and they're not going to, there's no way to know unless you have someone on the team, and they shouldn't be sharing with you. So there's no way for you to know the top of the budget. The only way to know is if they say some magic words, which is, this is our best and final offer. And so the way for you to get there is you ask open-ended questions and ask for more in an open-ended way. Is there any more room in your budget? Is there any way you could throw in more money? I have another offer. I'm having a hard time making this decision and things like that. And you could even ask towards the end, like, is this your best and final? And so that's what I recommend for job offers specifically. And then to your question around what do we do if, let's say, they say this is our best and final and it sort of falls short of your expectations, I would say keep that list of priorities in mind. Where move down the list. So, okay, you negotiated cash or equity and all that. And then maybe now you care about work from home or travel reimbursement or things like that. Then you can go down that list. Like, okay, thanks for sharing that this is best and final. I don't know. What are your policies around work from home? What are your policies around travel reimbursement and things like that?
Amazing. Yeah. And what do you do if like you've reached a stalemate? Like, or I guess maybe that's kind of going back to what we said earlier of like, are they the best company to work for? Because I think some
Mm.
people maybe then settle or like, well, I guess that's that. Or like you said, it's like a tough job market or for whatever reason, but like, yeah, the salary's lower than expected. Maybe they're not budging on the other stuff and you're starting to be like, should I just say yes? But then it
Mm.
feels like maybe more resentful or you're not in that position of power. So like, how do you think about then making that decision if you should work with them or kind of like reclaiming your own power in that situation?
Yeah, that's a very personal decision. Like it depends what your, I don't know, savings or priorities are in the family sense. But what I recommend in that context is, and actually I always recommend this, get another offer. And it doesn't have to be competitive to this first company that you're excited about. Of course, it can't be completely out of left field, but it needs to be somewhat in, like, let's say if you're applying to tech, it could be in tech, but it doesn't have to be like the best offer ever. And the reason is there's a couple of reasons. One is just saying that you have another offer makes you more confident. You are handling the negotiation from a very different mindset. Companies can read through that. They negotiate day in and day out. And so they can really read a candidate and can tell if you do actually have another offer or not. And of course, this goes without saying, but you don't want to lie about having another offer. Of course, it's unethical, but also they can read that. It's a lot of micro expressions that show up. And so get another offer for your own confidence. It also unlocks new mechanisms in the companies. Once you say you have another offer, they don't want to lose you. They have spent a lot of time interviewing you and they like you and all that. So it does that. It generally opens up new budget. And then the other piece is this actually happened to my husband, Alex, where he actually fell in love with the second company. So he was, okay, I'll get another offer just because you tell me to.
Yeah, just for that leverage.
Yeah, for that leverage.
To
And
know I'm in demand. I get to make the choice.
it was actually for his type of role, you had to do take home exams and it would take tens of hours, at least 10 hours. So there was a cost to it. Of course, there's a cost to getting another offer. There's so much time and effort. But he ended up falling in love with that second company. And that's the offer he went with. So you're also giving yourself more optionality in the event you do like the second offer more.
I love that. Now I'm like, don't think of an elephant. Oh my God. And before we go into like kind of like breaking down our steps for the powerful stuff listeners, what are some like personal examples that you can think of how negotiation comes into play? We've talked about, founders and companies and whatnot, but yeah, do you find like your clients or yourself using it like with your husband or friends or your family, or what are some like kind of interesting parallels that have shown up for you or others?
Yeah. I negotiate everything. So I negotiate obviously rent. I didn't know some people didn't even think to negotiate the rent. I live in San Francisco and I have always had a way below market rent, even though SF is so expensive.
Wait,
I
with that, or
negotiate.
just a pause there, because I'm sure everyone would like to know how to do that. What are a few of your main like quick tips of things
Yeah.
to say or what to focus
It's
on?
so interesting how there is a lot of transferable tips that I've already mentioned. So get another offer, find another similar place you could be staying, and then be gently persistent, be very collaborative. Maybe expand the pie. So something like a managed building. And so I say things like, I would love to refer friends here. I have so many friends who want to live near us, and I'm happy to refer them. And or offer something like, I can write a good review on Google Maps and Yelp and things like that. So offer things they might care about. Or like if you're negotiating with a specific person, you can say, I'm happy to tell your manager how great you were to work with, and yeah, things along those lines. So whatever you can offer, just maybe list as many things as you can, what's in it for them.
And with
um
that, or just curious, because like usually there's like that set price they say,
yeah,
or in like LA or SF, sometimes there's like a lot of people applying to live in the same place. So then
yeah,
how would you manage it then, or what are some questions or things you could do in that scenario, especially when they're like, this is the rent
yeah.
and we have a lot of other applicants?
This actually happened to me. So, sometimes in negotiations they say ask for a bit more and you'll probably land in the middle. So my building had a 4 weeks for free concession. When I first moved here 5 years ago. I'm currently at a different building, but anyway, they had 4 weeks for free, and I go there to negotiate. 'Cause what I do, in my mind, I'm like, I'm gonna ask for 8 weeks, and then like ideally we land at 6, but they actually said yes to 8. So I ended up living at this like beautiful place with like almost 2 months for free. They just said yes at 8 weeks for free.
You're just like,
So
I love this. I would love to move in. Can I have 8 weeks free instead of 2 or
yeah,
instead of
or
4?
instead of, yeah, exactly. And you would be surprised how much you can get just by asking. It's so wild. Like, I strongly recommend, maybe as a takeaway, I recommend to the listeners, just go around asking for things, maybe today or in the next few days. Just ask for a favor here and there, or like, I don't know, like I can't think of, I mean, of course, I also negotiate, just to go back to your original question, I negotiate airline seats. So I
How do you do that? Oh my gosh.
go.
Now we're getting to the juice of it.
I just go to the counter and I say, is there any chance? So I get very motion sickness, as I mentioned. So is there any chance you have an open seat towards the front? Because like, it makes me a little less sick. And like, that's it. That's all you can say. And people want to help. And I always try to help in back. So maybe with an airplane, I sometimes maybe can bring like snacks for the staff and things like that. So what else do I negotiate? Oh, I negotiate concert tickets. So,
How do you do
so
that? Oh my gosh, get me an Eras tour ticket for $50. That would be amazing. I'm joking.
yeah, I will typically just get like an average price, and then maybe either go to the counter and like try to sort of get to a better seat, or you could just go to the better seat if it's empty.
And what happens if somebody comes and they're like, this isn't your seat?
Then you go back. Like, it's okay, but it's so rare. One time, the concert was sold out. This was in Boston, actually. I was just walking around with a friend in Boston, and I think it was Brian Adams, and I was just outside and like, oh my gosh, it's Brian Adams. Can we get in? There were no tickets, and we just talked to the people at the door and like, is there any chance you can let us in? Like, we love this artist and it's sold out. I don't know where to get tickets right now. And they're like, okay, sure. At first they said no, ma'am, it's not allowed. Like, okay. And then just staying there. This is the persistent side, but also being nice and cordial. And we just stood outside for a bit. And like, are you sure? Do you mind just like letting us in? They're like, okay, sure, get in.
That's so great. So it's, yeah, just like persistence, assuming best intentions. And I'm also
Yeah,
hearing like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Like
absolutely.
what you said with like the concert tickets and just going to that seat, like then they just ask you to move and then you go back. But I think people are so afraid of like rejection
Yeah,
that they don't do that. And I was gonna ask, like, do you personally, I mean, I have my own things I can say about rejection, but like, do you personally have something that helps clients or people get over that fear of like rejected, or if I ask and what if they say no?
I think with clients, there's the cost. Yeah, actually, one thing that I tell my clients is, especially for women have a hard time negotiating because we've been socialized not to negotiate. And we actually do get penalized when we negotiate. Like, we're seen as more aggressive and all that. What I say is, the money you're leaving on the table, think of it as it could have gone to your kids or your parents or someone, because we have a hard time advocating for ourselves. And so if you think of it as like, if I don't get this extra, I don't know, 10K, this could have gone to, like, I don't know, a birthday party for my kid, or like a trip and a gift and some savings for my mom and things like that. That really helps. I use that for myself. I use that mindset for myself when I go into, like, I'm actually advocating for the people I love, because this money could go for them. That really helps. And so, yeah, you're afraid of rejection, or you could be making X amount more for someone you love. And then the trade-off is so different.
Yeah. Yeah, making it bigger than you. And I always also tell my clients, like, it's never rejection.
Mhm.
It's just a redirection in the sense
Mhm.
of like, what's meant for you won't miss you.
Mm,
And if you're meant to work at that job and you're going to feel valued and trusting that everything's in alignment, like, you'll work at that job. And if it doesn't work out with them, or they just don't have the budget, or they're kind of like nasty in the negotiations or whatever, it's like then something even better is coming along.
I
And
like that.
so, like you kind of said earlier, it's like it's like, oh, I'm grateful I dodged a bullet, but I wouldn't have known that had I not put myself out there and kind of saw how they reacted.
Yeah. Another thing is, I are you familiar with Annie Duke? She's actually a professional poker player. She
Cool.
was getting a PhD in, I want to say, psychology at University of Pennsylvania at one point, and she had a health issue and she couldn't, I don't know, she needed to make money. And so she went into poker. And now she's a world famous poker player. And she's written some books on decision making. But one thing that changed my life, one concept that she talks about, is this concept of resulting, which means resulting is when you put a value on your decisions based on the outcome. And we shouldn't be doing that. So, for example, the way this has helped me in negotiations is I'm going to make the ask either way. If I get a no, that doesn't mean I shouldn't have asked. If I make it seem like, if I get a no and I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have asked, that's resulting, because you're valuing your decision based on the outcome, which we shouldn't do. You could get a no, of course. We can get a no anytime. So I hope I explained that in a clear way.
Yeah. So it's like focusing on your inputs versus your output. Like
Exactly. Yeah.
being grateful that you did it, that you did the thing of asking versus like something that we can't control, which is their response.
Yeah, exactly. And the way I do the prep beforehand is like, I will probably get a no, but I'd rather ask, because if I get a yes, that's so much value to me. It's almost like an expected value formula where, like, the yes is so valuable to me. The no, it's like just a little bit of awkwardness on the spot. So I might as well ask.
Yeah, and Carolyn Elliott, who wrote Existential Kink, who I mention a lot in Powerful Stuff,
Mm,
also says like you should kind of go on a rejection spree where you put yourself
mm,
out there for a lot of things that you assume you'll get a no in,
yes.
because inevitably, statistically, like if you do it for like 100 things, you'll probably get a yes somewhere.
Yes.
And B, it'll desensitize you to hearing no, and you'll just
Mhm.
like get such a stronger muscle on asking for things that might have felt out of your comfort zone before,
Yeah.
but it'll help you become like less affected by hearing a no. And so
Yeah.
she actually has like a rejection challenge where you like try to seek out jobs that you don't feel qualified for, or people that feel out of your league, and like be okay with hearing no, because it'll give you so much more power and strength and resilience, and like chances are you actually will get a yes or expand beyond where you would be otherwise.
Yeah, and to add a personal touch to that, I actually pursued my husband. He's
Yes.
a very shy person. So I grew up in Albania, and we have even more traditional gender roles than in the US. And they say you never want to pursue a man, you're a woman, they should be pursuing you. But I had met him and I'd seen how wholesome and wonderful he is. And he's also very shy. He wasn't making moves. This was back in college. We were so young. And I reached out to him multiple times, and now I'm so glad I did. But I had to really move outside my comfort zone. But I'm like, yeah, like you said, the rejection spree. If you get a yes in something that is just so wonderful, I thank my 21-year-old self every day that I, took a chance.
What was it that kept you going when you didn't get an initial response from him?
He is the most wholesome person I've ever met. He lights up every room, and his energy is just undeniable. Like the positivity that he radiates, like that is so wonderful. This guy needs to be in my life. So he was pretty shy, and he was, you know, back in Colorado at the time. And so, yeah, I was like, I need to make this happen. And
And
we've
what
been
did
together 12 years now. So
I
I'm
love
so glad I did.
what a good success story.
Yeah.
And what does he say now? Like, was he just like nervous, or when he like felt relieved when you were reaching out and he didn't have to?
Yeah. Yeah. He was like, I was so shy. I didn't know. Yeah. I didn't know how to handle this. Or like he'll say, like, I thought you were outside my league and stuff like that.
Oh, that's so sweet. Real life negotiation. Okay, we have 10 minutes left. So I could just talk to you for hours. We'll definitely need to get you on for like a part two because there's so
Let's
many
do it.
loops open that I want to return to. But if we're just to break it down for the listener in a few steps, and then we'll end with a quick medi, let's just go through each step. So like the loyal listeners and new listeners, welcome. But imagine they're going through a negotiation, whether it's like, you know, business, salary. I had negotiations with my husband when we were dating, like if, we should commit to each other. So what is like what that first step that people should journal on or get clear on? I know you've kind of mentioned the steps throughout the podcast, but just
Yeah.
for us to like kind of tie it together in a rapid fire way. Step number one that they do.
Step number one is make a list of all the things that are important to you in this job offer or deal or business deal or whatever it is. So for job offers, it's pretty straightforward. It could be cash, equity, work from home, flexibility, I guess commute, company reputation, visibility to leadership, if you have direct reports, title, and things like that. You make a whole, I actually have a template for this. I think it's in my website, but just I don't know, email
I'll
me.
look
I
for it
can
in the
send
show
it.
notes, or
Yeah,
yeah,
we'll
or
put it
you
in the
can
show.
email
Yeah.
Gerta.
And you have the list, order it in order of importance to you, and mark the non-negotiables. And those will be, let's say, you could also not have a non-negotiable. Some people just need a job right now, and it's totally fine. But if you do have non-negotiables, mark them. Ask for those at your first interaction. So, like I said, if it's like title and work from home flexibility, you want to that will be the first topic that you discuss when the negotiations start.
Mm. Yeah,
um
so getting clear on the non-negotiables and like, yeah, if I'm thinking
your
about,
list of priorities.
yeah, my relationship with my husband when we were debating if we should commit because he was like on his motorcycle trip and not sure if he should be in a relationship or not because he always thought he would be single, but then he really liked me and we had fallen in love in LA. And when we went into the negotiations, I was like, or as I called them, I was like, for me, like my priority is safety. And if I don't feel safe, then I don't feel free. So if I don't feel safe with you, it's like it doesn't make sense for me to continue engaging with you in this sense. So anyways, for
That's
step one, I guess,
beautiful.
in
Yeah,
that situation, my priority was like my feelings of like safety.
safety with him. Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, you already knew this.
Yes. Or I'm giving a retroactive example, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. And then going into step two.
Yeah, and sorry, just to go back to this in the business sense, it could be, I guess maybe with your co-founder, it could be like, do I need a co-founder to begin with? Because some people, let's say if you're not technical, for example, and you're doing a VC-backed startup, you need someone technical, and like having a co-founder is much, much better than not having one. But for some people, you don't have to have one. So like it depends, right? This list of priorities is different for everyone. And it could be like, how important is equity for you? And how important is that we have similar lifestyles, or there's so much to negotiate with a co-founder. I actually have a free worksheet on like startup negotiations on my website. So step
Which is
two.
yournegotiations.com
Yes.
for everyone listening. Okay. Yeah. And I think some people just go into things blind and they're just like, I'm just going to wait and see. But it's so important to get clear on what we value before we go into a conversation like that, because then it can feel really confusing, or we end up feeling good in the moment in the
Yeah.
conversation and feel resentful later. So I love like step one, getting
Yeah.
clear on like what is actually your not negotiable and what will make you feel the most valued.
Yeah, absolutely. And then step two is you want to let them say the number first. And then for your husband, I'm trying to figure out how this could apply. But I guess maybe it's good to hear in that type of relational negotiation, if we're going to call it, like, sometimes we have our own desires and we're not hearing what the other person wants. So letting them say what they want. So it sounds like he said he is worried about being in a relationship and during his motorcycle, but he also likes you. So it's good that now you have more information. Like you have some leverage.
Yes. Yes. We
Yeah.
need leverage. Yeah. And so then with that, like, what do you recommend kind of like it, so people have written down their priorities and what they value, and
Yeah.
maybe you've gotten to that first step of the conversation and you ask the other person first always of
Yeah.
like what do they have in mind or what do they suggest, and then what is like the next thing for the listeners to like write down or think about or get clear on from there.
Yeah, so it gets a little more complex from here. It's like a decision tree. So say it gets more complicated. But yeah, so you have your list of priorities and non-negotiables. You let them make the first move or number and all that. And then you want to start getting creative on, like, you want to ask questions to understand what they care about and what they don't care too much about. And then you start to see if there's any way to be creative around that. And yeah, like I said, there's like 20 things you could be doing here, so it's hard to break it down. But if there is one thing you really care about, you gently persistent you become gently persistent on asking for more in that direction. This especially in the job offer sense and in the business context. I'm trying to keep all three up in the air,
Yeah.
but it's hard. Yeah.
Yeah. And well, yeah, and I think it's also like kind of, yeah, with I guess the example that I gave, I think a big part of it was like acknowledging his viewpoint and like reflecting it back to him and letting him know that I understood it and
Mhm.
that like you know, I think I got clear on that he was in a long distance relationship before and it was very um possessive, and he viewed like if we were in a long distance relationship, therefore it must equal like possession, and he won't be
Mm.
able to go to a bar on his travels and like just meet new people because like a girlfriend would be too jealous. So it was also like getting clear on what his definitions of like long distance relationship were and like the implications that those had for him, so then I could be like, actually for me, like what it means or what safety means is that like we're actually more free to be ourselves and go out and meet new people because we trust that like nothing is going to happen sexually or
Yeah.
romantically with like other people.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. Because you have the boundaries and you can play within that. Yeah, I love that. Now I'm saying I love
Oh
that.
my gosh, we love it.
um,
And then yeah, like kind of what are like the ending kind of steps or final things for people to write down, journal on, reflect on ahead of like stepping into whatever negotiation they're going into.
I was gonna say for the last step, it would be once you hear things like this is our best and final offer, things like that along those lines. I personally like to push one more time, and it doesn't have to be in the same direction, but it could be in a different direction. So we've been negotiating, let's say in the job context, on the salary, and then I'm like, okay, this is best and final. If you feel comfortable, you can ask for a bit more in salary, or you can ask for something else. Now you go down the list, yeah, and then let me think about journaling. What I would strongly recommend in general is actually not negotiating on the spot and live. I get very nervous, or like I get kind of stressed out to live. So it's nice to, like, as we talked about the probability of it, you have a higher chance of making the right negotiation move if you take some space and think about your and strategize your next move.
Yeah. Yeah, giving it time and space, and like we were saying, like the silence. And then just to chime in with some of the energetics that I heard you say and that I love keeping in mind is just like maybe journaling on like how could it be a win-win for you and the other person? Like
Mm-hmm.
what is like that best case outcome where there's room for everyone at the top? And like if you're holding on to like a fear or resentment, what is that fear telling you? Why is it coming up? How are you projecting that potentially onto the other person, and how could you kind of like infuse that with best intentions or love, and then kind of like how envisioning yourself on the other side of the negotiation and like how
Mm.
you'll feel relieved, how you'll feel empowered, how it really truly did work out best for both of you, and kind
Mhm.
of going into that conversation with those best intentions and that like same side of the table energy
Yeah.
attitude.
I love that. Yeah, I don't journal much on negotiations. This is a very interesting. Thanks for sort of that approach. But it could also be, I think, what has been the most surprising for my clients and students has been how your dreams can come true. Like, as I
Yes.
mentioned, yeah.
Double tweet or retweet. Go on.
Like, yeah, the client, our best performing client, we increased their comp by over 500,000 from the initial offer to the final offer. It was 550K more than what the company offered them, and that's just wild. So stepping into that, like believing that it could be possible.
Right. Yeah. Believing in the abundance, believing
Yes.
that, oh yeah, like I deserve this. And coming back to like that energetics of worthiness of like who is that version of me? This is another good journaling question. Who is that version of me who knows that I'm worth it? Who knows that I deserve it? Who is that version of me who knows it and doesn't need to shout it, but is like relaxed in that confidence and it just oozes out of me?
Mhm.
And me getting what I want actually benefit the other person or the other party because then they get a happier employee or then they get a like even more energized co-founder. And so how does it create that like win-win-win for all of us
Exactly.
and like the entity that we're a part of?
Exactly. Yes.
Amazing. Okay, well, we'll just do a quick little meditation and then sign off with where people can find you and any other like last little rapid fire negotiation
Sounds great.
tips, tricks that you want to throw out. So we'll all just go ahead and close our eyes, taking a deep breath in through our nose. Exhale, sighing it out, relaxing our shoulders, relaxing our face. Another deep breath in. And exhale, release, letting your breath waterfall down your spine, relaxing your hips, your knees, your toes. And then third and deepest breath in to come into full presence. Exhaling it out. And in your mind's eyes, you keep your eyes closed, calling forth the negotiation that you're stepping into, whether it's personal with your landlord, with your co founder, with a company, with an investor. And just noticing it from this objective perspective. And noticing if there's any fear or tension or resistance there. And if there is, breathing into it, allowing that fear or resistance to speak. And as you let that fear or resistance speak, just acknowledging it and just knowing that it's just the smaller inner child version of you who might be a little scared of the unknown or of rejection. Just letting that fear or resistance know that it's natural that it's showing up. It means that you're on the cusp of growth. And as you breathe into it and acknowledge it, noticing it just starting to fall away, bringing more lightness, bringing more magic into the scene. And now imagine looking at the other person that you're negotiating with and just seeing them with so much loving light. Seeing them and their best intentions, their loved ones, their families, their whole world that they're a part of. Just seeing them for the wholeness of who they are. And then feeling them see you in that way. Feeling both of you kind of elevate and rise together as you both are tapped into your own light and your reflection back to each other magnifies the other's light. Trusting in the positive outcome. And then watching the scene play out of this negotiation from this energy. Noticing how that version of you who's connected to your worth shows up in the scene. Noticing how that changes the energy of the scene, impacting the other person positively, creating a magnetism around you. noticing how that allows the negotiation to unfold perfectly with grace, with ease, feeling that in your heart, and then noticing how it ripples into other areas of your life, elevating those other areas as well, helping you feel more connected to your power, your worth, your deservingness in all areas. And then looking at that version of you connected to your worth and just asking them, what is the perfect wisdom? What is the perfect next step you can take? Or the perfect reminder that you can carry with you going into this negotiation? Trusting whatever they say, thanking them, and then breathing this light, this love, this peace from that future scene into your heart and exhaling it throughout your body. And then another deep inhale. Exhale, opening your eyes, coming back into space. If you've just done the meditation, just taking a few moments to write down, or right after the podcast ends, writing down what came up for you. What is that piece of wisdom? How do you feel in that scene with the other person? Maybe all the gratitudes you have for them or for that company. So you go into it from a place of like deep gratitude and love.
So beautiful.
Yay. This was so powerful. Is there any last little advice or negotiation thing to leave the powerful stuff listeners with? You've already given us so much information.
Yeah, I guess I love the negotiations could be also playful. I don't know if we covered that, but I like the playfulness of it. I take it very like lightly, and I also think of it as a game, but not in a like a Monopoly or poker, but it's more like, if I say this thing could happen, or like we could play together in this sort of game with kind of invisible rules. So I like to bring a playfulness energy to it as well.
That's beautiful. I always actually made a post once about gamifying your life, like not taking it so seriously. And that's what powerful stuff is about too. Like it doesn't all have to be so serious. And yeah, like gamifying it, like kind of being like a mad scientist. Like, oh, if I like, wouldn't it be fun if I asked this and they said yes? Like, let me try it and see what happens. What if I
Exactly.
did it in this way? Like, what would happen then? And not being so attached to the nose just as a scientist isn't like, oh shit, I wanted it to be this way and like the data proves this. They're like kind of unattached to it. They're just kind of curious about finding out like what happens.
Yeah, and exactly. And one other thing is the power of words. I assume you've covered this, or we'll cover this in your podcast at some point, but in negotiations, words can be so powerful. If we have like 30 seconds, I there's this study that was done in the in 1970s from Harvard professor, and she noticed that when people were standing in line, if you try to ask someone to if you could cut in line, if you use the word because, even if you didn't have a good excuse behind it, your chances of people letting you cut in line went from like around 60 to like 95% chance, even if you didn't have a good reason. Like even if you didn't say I'm in a rush or whatever, it's like, oh, I'm eating an apple. They're like, oh, sure, go ahead. So um, the power of words, there's like the sort of the more metaphysical concept, but there's also like in psychology studies, they've seen how they can help you.
I love that. The power of because.
Yeah,
Yeah, just like giving a reason and helping, because it's also like you're inviting the other person to understand more versus like entitlement.
yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah. Wow, so powerful, Gerta. Oh my gosh, we're definitely going to need a part two because I found myself wondering like all your other little tactics, all the other things in your life that you've negotiated. I love your relationship example. And yeah, where can people find you if they want to hear more?
Yeah, just go to yournegotiations.com. So yournegotiations.com, and I have some free resources there, and you can find my Instagram account there, my LinkedIn account, and I'm trying to post more everywhere. So I'm trying to start a newsletter. It's a lot of work, but you will find stuff on my website.
All right, yournegotiations.com. Thank you so much for being
Thank you.
here and sharing with us the lovely art of negotiations, the mindset, the tips and tricks around that. This has been so powerful, and we will see you all next week for more powerful stuff.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.